I had always found old things unsettling. Antique items seemed to carry some kind of energy, like they were tied to a past better left alone. My mom, however, adored them. Every weekend, she would scour flea markets and antique shops, returning home with something new. Dusty books, candle holders, porcelain figurines. "They have a soul," she'd say, carefully dusting off her latest find. I never believed her words until she brought home the doll. It happened on a Saturday. I was sitting in the kitchen when Mom came home, her arms full of treasures. Among them was a large bag, from which she pulled it. "Look at this amazing find," she exclaimed, holding up the doll. The doll was strange. Tall, made of porcelain, with faded blue eyes that seemed unnervingly large. Her black hair was curled into glossy ringlets, and her once white dress was now a dirty, tattered gray. "Mom, why do you even need this?" I asked, my irritation obvious. "She's beautiful, a rare antique," Mom said, clearly oblivious to how eerie the doll looked. She placed the doll on a shelf in the living room, directly across from the couch. Now, every time I sat there, I could feel its glassy gaze following me. Sometimes I even thought its head was slightly turned toward me, though I knew that was impossible. I tried to ignore it, brushing off my unease as overactive imagination. But each night, the feeling of being watched grew stronger. The first strange occurrence happened a few days later. I woke up in the middle of the night to an odd sound. It was faint, like soft, deliberate footsteps on the wooden floor. At first, I thought it was Mom moving around, but the sound didn't seem to be coming from her room. It was from the living room. Curiosity got the better of me. Grabbing my phone, I turned on its flashlight and carefully went downstairs. The living room looked normal at first glance, but then I noticed something odd. The doll wasn't on the shelf. My heart started to race. I scanned the room and finally found it lying on the floor near the window. Maybe Mom accidentally knocked it over, I thought, though it didn't make much sense. Why would she leave it there? I picked up the doll and returned it to the shelf. This time I made sure it was securely positioned. After double-checking, I switched off the lights and headed back upstairs. But as I lay in bed, I heard the footsteps again. They were louder now, moving with a strange rhythm, as though something small and unsteady was walking across the floor. The next night, I woke up with a sharp sense of being watched. The feeling was so strong I couldn't ignore it. Opening my eyes, I was met with darkness. The room was pitch black, save for the faint glow of moonlight slipping through the curtains. Reaching for my phone, I turned on the flashlight and scanned the room. At first, everything seemed fine. My desk, my chair, the closet, all were in their usual places. Then I saw her. The doll stood in the corner of my room. She was perfectly still, her head slightly tilted to one side. Those cold, glassy eyes stared directly at me. I froze, my mind racing. How was she here? I distinctly remembered leaving her on the shelf in the living room. For a long moment, I just stared, unable to move. Finally, summoning all my courage, I got out of bed, picked her up, and carried her back downstairs. Her porcelain body was cold to the touch, and holding her filled me with a strange unease. I placed her back on the shelf, making absolutely sure she was steady. Turning on every light in the living room, I gave myself a moment to breathe. But as soon as I turned off the lights and headed back upstairs, I heard it again. A faint creak, followed by a thud. When I looked back, the doll was on the floor once more. After that night, my sleep was never the same. The footsteps, the soft thuds, the whispers, they all grew more frequent. It was as though the house had come alive, each sound clawing at my sanity. But the most terrifying moment came the night she tried to enter my room. I was just about to fall asleep when I heard the now familiar sound of footsteps. They were slow, deliberate, and coming down the hallway toward my door. The steps stopped right outside. Then came the scratching. It was faint at first, like a gentle tap of nails against wood. Then it grew louder and more insistent, as if something or someone was trying to claw its way inside. "Who's there?" I whispered, though I didn't want to hear an answer. What I heard instead was her voice. "Let me in. Let's play," she said. It was soft, childlike, but it carried a chilling undertone that froze me in place. Before I could react, the door slowly began to creak open. The light in my room flickered and went out. Grabbing my phone, I turned on the flashlight just in time to see her. The doll was standing in the doorway, her head tilted, her lips stretched into an unnatural smile. She took a step forward. "Don't be afraid," she whispered. "It's only a game." The next morning, I told my mom everything. She looked at me with a mixture of disbelief and concern. "It's just your imagination," she said. "You've been stressed lately." "Mom, I'm not making this up. The doll moves on its own." Mom sighed and offered to put the doll in the basement. Reluctantly, I agreed, hoping it would stop the strange events. That night, the house was eerily quiet. For a moment, I thought it was over. But then I heard them. The footsteps. They were faster this time, almost frantic, as if something was running down the hallway. I heard the basement door creak open. "You thought you could hide me?" Her voice echoed. The room grew cold, and the light above me began to flicker. Then it went out completely, leaving me in darkness. When I shone the flashlight at the doorway, she was there. Her glassy eyes glowed faintly, and she began to move toward me, her tiny feet clicking softly against the floor. "You have nowhere to go," she said, her voice soft and sinister. I couldn't let this continue. Desperate, I searched online for ways to banish cursed objects or spirits. One article mentioned a ritual that might sever her connection to me. I gathered candles, drew a protective circle with chalk on the floor, and placed a mirror at its center. That night, I sat inside the circle, clutching my phone tightly. When I heard her steps, I forced myself to stay calm. She appeared, as she always did, her figure emerging from the shadows. Her movements were slow, deliberate, and filled with malice. "You can't stop me," she hissed. "You won't scare me anymore," I replied, though my voice trembled. She stepped closer, but when she reached the edge of the circle, she stopped abruptly. Her expression twisted into one of rage, and her glowing eyes brightened. I began reciting the words I had found. "You do not belong to this world. Leave now." Her porcelain body began to crack, and from those cracks seeped a black, smoke-like substance. "You will never win," she whispered as her form dissolved into nothingness. For the first time in weeks, the house was silent. But sometimes, in the stillness of the night, I still hear faint footsteps in the hallway.